I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then for so many years, I was just like super focused on my career. If you do have financial responsibilities, like I think it's really risky to leave your well-paid job, right? Like I don't think there's any point sugarcoating that. I haven't actually had a proper day off since like Christmas Day, since I left my job. It really is true that like, the highs feel sweeter. And when I had some pivotal moments of certain clients that I signed, I just remember sitting there and I was like, wait, this happened? This thing happened? Are you kidding me?
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast that helps high-achieving professionals redefine success on their terms and build careers they truly love. As always, please do give a thumbs up to this episode. It really helps the podcast reach new people. In today's episode, we're talking about pros and cons of pivoting from corporate to entrepreneurship. And I'll be discussing it with my guest, Morgaine Conway-Grim, who worked at JP Morgan Private Bank and GQG Partners, and after that, founded a company called Hawks and Doves, a financial education company designed to bring finance to life in a sharp, engaging, and relevant way. So, Morgaine, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's go back to the start of your career and tell me, how did you choose finance in the first place? And then we'll deep dive into why you decided to pivot into entrepreneurship.
I wanted to understand how the world worked. So I was really keen on like starting a career in finance. And so that's really how I got started.
So how long were you in finance before started to get this entrepreneurial itch?
So it actually also goes back to when I was a kid, because when I knew I wanted to work in finance and I also knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then for so many years, I was just like super focused on my career. I hadn't really thought about it for ages. And then over the years, it started coming back. But then I started to notice a few gaps and a few areas within the industry that I worked in. But honestly, it took years and years and years to get to like an actual business idea that was a viable product or solution, and also to work up the guts to make the break and leave.
What was that kept missing from your career? Because clearly your desire for curiosity, knowing how the world works, that desire was satisfied.
Yes.
So what was missing now looking back that made you still think about entrepreneurship on and on?
It was really about pushing myself really deeply and focusing on a really very deeply held purpose, because I had purpose within my job and the jobs that I had, but there was just this real strong purpose that I just really wanted to pursue. And so it ultimately came down to that. It was like the want and desire to pursue that and to throw myself into like the pretty terrifying world of entrepreneurship away from corporate life became stronger than the satisfaction that I was getting.
You have come up with this idea as you were still working in finance.
Yeah.
How did you refine this idea and validate it?
I was lucky enough to be able to completely coincidentally, this was not planned, validate it within the company that I used to work at. I actually in essence, designed an education program for the incoming class of juniors and ran that alongside many other people. It was a real success. And that was, at the time, just part of one of the many hats I wore at my previous firm. But then it was after that I started thinking, that was successful. That provided a huge amount of value to these participants. I wonder. And then it went pretty quickly from there. So.
Did you find some people like from other companies to ask them, okay, do you think there could be a niche? Like, I bet you didn't jump into it straight away without speaking to more people.
So I just present the idea to different people that I really trusted and who are, largely much more experienced than I am in the world and in the industry. And really through a lot of those conversations, and, they would ask me tough questions, and that helped to validate it. So there were a lot of conversations that I had.
And did you have almost like line up of a couple of first clients before you jumped, or did you decide that you'll figure it out afterwards?
Unbeknownst to me, just before I left my previous company, they actually became my first client. They called me up and they said, we'd like to be your first client. We, really value the solution that you're providing. And I was literally gobsmacked. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? That was
amazing.
unplanned. But like every entrepreneur's absolute dream. And so, yeah, so I mean, literally like I got started with them pretty pronto. And that was just incredible. And then you're prospecting. Right? Like it's incredible to have that anchor client, but like in any business, then it's like, okay, let's go. I've never been in a full-on prospecting role. I've always really been like either the investment talent that's brought in or somebody else. Like it's never been my job to full-on prospect. I've learned so much through it. And yeah, it's many stories of like serendipitous moments, but really had to just get out there and be like, okay, everyone I know, can you do me a favor? Can you help me? Can you introduce me to somebody? And that was uncomfortable at first, I have to say, because I'm usually not the type of person to be like, everybody help me. But I just suddenly was like, let's go. Please help. Please help.
But let's not skip the moment of you actually making the decision to leave
Yes.
the corporate path. Can you tell me what was going through your head? Was it like positive emotions? Was it scary? Did you have many doubts? What was it like?
It was so scary. It was so hard to make that decision. And then it was really hard to actually rip the Band-Aid off and do it, if you like. There's a few things that I think were really important with that. Number one, I believe communication is like incredibly important in every area of life. But, you know, I had very much kept up a certain level of communication with my boss at the time so that this did not come straight out of the blue, which was a really important thing. I sat down with him in person, had a conversation with him. It was really tough and it was really, honestly, it was like a little sad. It was really sad because I loved the place that I worked at. He's a great boss and there was a great career path for me. So it was a really hard thing to do. He was very supportive. He's been a mentor of mine over the years. A huge amount of people were supportive.
And what was the biggest doubt that you had?
Am I going to lose all the money I've saved in the first few months and spend it on silly things? You just don't know. So that was my biggest fear.
How about your family and friends? What did they say?
I'm so lucky because they were so supportive of me.
That's amazing. And also, like, sometimes I do hear in these interviews, like, oh, people say, why would you give up? You have nothing to complain about. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Just stay. So it's good you didn't face that much pressure.
I'm sure there were people that thought that. I'm almost 100% sure. But I kind of had gotten to the point where I was so sure of my decision that I wasn't even asking anyone for their opinion. I just was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm super excited about it. And then that's it.
That's amazing.
But on that, there's one other point that I just thought of is one of the reasons why I say like I really, enjoyed working at the place I used to work before founding Hawks and Doves is because working there gave me confidence. And I think that confidence is one of the most important things because what that actually means is like a nice word, whatever, but it means like the confidence to believe that what you have to offer is actually like of some type of value. And trust me, there's been a million times when that confidence has just crumbled and like gone onto the floor. But there was a good amount, like a strong enough foundation of it that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try. And like, you have to believe in yourself and the company and all these things so deeply because otherwise I probably never would have like hit send on my launch message,
And in this thought process, as you were making the decision, was perception of others a feature at all? Was it something that you cared about?
Right at the beginning, before I launched, I don't even know how many people read over my website. I sent my launch message that I was going to put on LinkedIn. Like, I needed somebody to like sign off on it. And I know that maybe sounds a bit pathetic, but I did. I really needed that kind of buy-in. Whether I cared so much about what people would say, I mean, I did. Of course I did. But now I think that really what I care about is the impact and value that Hawks and Doves gives to people.
You told me that some people even approached you and asked you, oh, like, how did you decide to do it? It did feel to me like a lot of people were very curious about the jump, right? Can you tell me more about that? Why were they curious? What were they asking you about?
A lot of people do have that entrepreneurship streak within them. And I think it's just interesting when like one of your own, if you like, from the corporate world, goes ahead and does it. And there were lots of questions, like how are you thinking about compliance? How did you choose the name? How did you build your brand? What were the legal processes? People in finance were all like super laser focused on the details, right? So it was a lot of detail driven. But I think it was curiosity, and I think some people want to do their own thing as well.
What was holding them back from doing it on their own?
I think from the world of finance, it's fairly unusual, right? Like, not saying I'm unusual. I don't think I am. I just think it's generally fairly unusual that you leave corporate world it's a very structured world, right? That we live in finance, and I think it's fairly unusual to leave that. Whereas, we were chatting before we started recording about the world of tech, for example, where it's so normal to like go leave and do your own startup or to drop out of college and start up your own thing. It's not really the common done thing within finance. I think to answer your question, I guess just anecdotally, I have asked that question, like, why do it? Like, do your thing. And I think one of the big things actually is responsibilities.
And what would you tell them now, having been through the thick of it? Like, are these financial worries justified about entrepreneurship?
Oh, they're absolutely justified. I mean, Hawks and Doves is in a great position financially, but I will caveat that to say it's not like you have the stability of having an income coming in every month and then, very likely a nice bonus at the end of the year. Personally, I don't think enough people talk about the financial reality of being an entrepreneur because, I certainly didn't feel ready to leave until I had a number in my head of an amount of money that I wanted to have saved that would make me feel comfortable. For everyone, that's going to be different. But I had a number, I reached it. If you do have financial responsibilities, like, I think it's really risky to leave your well-paid job, right? Like, I don't think there's any point sugarcoating that. Hawks and Doves is, fortunate enough to be in a great place, but that doesn't mean that, it's as certain and consistent as it was when I had a paycheck.
If you have someone who is in a corporate world and is thinking about this decision, what advice would you give them in terms of, first of all, finances? Like, what do they absolutely need to get right to de-risk this move? And secondly, in terms of plan B.
So I don't have a plan B. My full focus is on Hawks and Doves. Number one, like, how much money do you need to have in the bank to feel safe and secure that you can sustain your lifestyle for however long it takes? Because you don't want to be worrying and like scratching, in my opinion, for your first paycheck if what you're trying to build is something really big and sustainable. And now I know that goes against quite a lot of entrepreneurship advice, but I do think coming from the world that we all live in, when you're used to having that, a certain type of lifestyle, a certain type of paycheck, I think that if you suddenly go from that to zero and you have to completely change your lifestyle and you're changing what your business is. So that's number one, like, make sure you have enough money saved. And I think number two is like, consider the reasons you want to leave, because the reality is that, for example, one of the things that I found, frustrating in the past, I think a lot of people do, is like, no matter what your job, however investment focused it is or relationship focused, you still do a lot of admin. That just increases when you're an entrepreneur. It's not like you can be like, oh yeah, I don't have to think about like my tax. Well, no, you do have to think about your taxes like a lot. And then you have to think about all these other things. And then you have to ramp up on stuff that, well, for me at least, I never knew about before. And so there's constant admin and there's constant work. And I haven't actually had a proper day off since like Christmas Day, since I left my job. Like, I'm constantly every single day thinking about the business. And so it's really, really hard work, basically. So I would say, think about the reasons why you're leaving, and if it's kind of like, what's the push-pull? Is it a move towards the purpose that you're trying to achieve with this thing, or the gap you think you can fill in the market with your business? Or is it more a retaliation about something in your current role? And I would think about the two of those.
And you've also mentioned kind of revenue streams, almost like having ideally a validated business idea before you make this jump.
Yes,
right? That's why
100%.
I asked you, how did you know there is a gap? Because I think this idea of like jumping into entrepreneurship and figuring it out is completely, reckless.
It's just like a recipe for disaster. And again, I don't know if this advice necessarily applies to everybody, but certainly if I were to give the advice to myself and I was somebody who, I really liked corporate world, I would, just be cautious for sure.
And you've also mentioned to me before about importance of having good relationships. And can you tell me more about that? Because I think this is the most critical part, is to have good relationships with people in your industry, as simple
100%.
as that.
100%. And it's not like, networking for a reason with an angle. Like, it's just like, just be a nice person to work with and like build relationships over time. And I'll share one with you, which was a crazy moment of serendipity where basically I was walking along the street and I recognized this person that I used to work with. And I was like, oh my gosh, hi. Anyway, went over and said hello, told him what I was doing with Hawks and Doves. And actually, he ended up introducing me an institution that was my client, that became my client. The biggest thing I've learned is like to be pretty shameless about asking for help and asking for introductions. And that can come from so many unexpected places. So yeah, relationships they're just so important because, you know, even whilst I was leaving the firm I left to found Hawks and Doves, I made it my absolute goal to leave just with everything as tied up in a bow as was possible.
Can you tell me, what was the thing about entrepreneurship that has shocked you most?
I didn't expect how hard it would be for me to just post stuff, which may sound really silly, but I just had become so used to the ecosystem of compliance around you. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'd love to be able to just like hit send and not have to like get all these things approved. And then suddenly when you just have a camera in front of you and you can say whatever you want, and then you're like, oh, but would this be approved? And it's so silly.
Am I pushing the boundary a bit too much with my content?
How much do I just claim this? And so it really stressed me out. Much more than I thought it would. And then like the little things. So just even figuring out what legal documents I needed.
Does your corporate experience help you, and in which way, to run your own company? Yeah. And on the flip side, what were the skills that you realized you're missing and the corporate didn't and couldn't possibly equip you with this and you had to learn it on the go?
I think that almost every single part of my the successes that Hawks and Doves has had so far is down to all of the skills that I gained through working in finance. Because really, when you work in finance, you learn to just be kind of operating or try to be operating at this level of like diligence, excellence, like honesty, trustworthiness, like all of these things become so ingrained into us, high levels of professionalism. And so then when you start your own company and you try to, you know, still hit those same levels, it comes across well. So like I honestly owe a lot to corporate from all of that. I think the thing that it doesn't set you up for, the only thing really, is fully leaning into creativity in the way, like, how are you explaining something, not having to think about compliance, not right. Like there's, I think, a certain element of like constraint, as there should be, right, within the regulated financial service industry. But now stepping outside of it, I'm learning to kind of explore a bit more.
And you've mentioned that another thing you had to learn about is prospecting and getting new clients. Yeah. So what did it look like for you in practice? What does prospecting like represent? How did you do it?
I'm learning, to answer the question simply, my network. That's been the primary source of prospecting. I have been doing some cold reach outs and I will continue to do it. And then really it's trying to understand like what are the needs of that client. And then in terms of like building a bigger business, a more scalable business, I'm lucky enough again to have a lot of introductions. And there I'm doing a lot of cold reach outs to people who are from various different sectors that can help me build a better picture of the industries I'm trying to look at.
And I bet it's also important to be deliberate about what type of role you are trying to get.
Yes.
If your business is B2B, like
yes.
These are big organizations, like who is the decision maker in your particular area, right?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two verticals of decision maker and very often they sort of really overlap. Part of it is within any type of like training, development section within the firm. But I would say in terms of like who am I asking for the introduction to, it is either, you know, the training, the development, that kind of people development part of the firm, or it is managers.
And you've mentioned that you launched a newsletter as
yes.
well. Can you tell me more about it? Because you have decided against going B2C,
yeah.
right? And so your all prospecting and client base is B2B. So how does the newsletter kind of fit into the strategy?
It's called Markets Chat. I write it every Sunday. I take one headline in the financial press and explain it. So it's not like a roundup of the news or anything like that. The reason why I wrote it is because a lot of people would ask for like continuing education, if you like. I currently don't have a solution to be able to fulfill that. But I also consistently had people asking like, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? And I just thought, okay, let's just take one headline a week and just explain it. But like explain it in a way that's, if you don't know anything about finance, you can understand it. I always like weave in different themes, whether that's like Taylor Swift, James Bond, Charles Dickens, Pitbull, like it could be anything. But I try not to go too cheesy. But basically it's like, you know, when you, perhaps you find this, I certainly did when I first started reading news, you go through an article and then suddenly you get to this block of text that has all this jargon that you're like, I don't get it. Or like you're referring to something that I don't understand or that I didn't see, some historical context. And it kind of stalls the consumption of that piece of news. And I used to just skip a lot of this stuff. So what I'm hoping to achieve is to provide just like a really fun, lively explainer of the news that actually is hopefully also really helpful to somebody much more senior who knows way more about markets than I ever will. And it helps, you know, every Sunday they'll be reminded about hawks and doves. It's a great tool for brand awareness and hopefully it's something that's useful for people as well.
And let's touch upon soft lifestyle things.
Yes.
So I would love to hear, what are the biggest contrasts between your life now and your life in the corporate?
Honestly, it still feels weird. Like, you know, I was always in the office most of the time and being out and about on a weekday feels strange. I would say the biggest thing that's been really, really hard for me is to see, you know, when you're working, you're in your office, you're doing your stuff. At least in my career, there was very little time for thinking. As in, like, I don't think I'd ever be like, I'm going to leave my desk. I'm going to go sit in that room and I'm just going to think. And so now I think a lot. And that sounds really like self-aggrandizing. So I think for me, the hardest thing still is an unwind of like, what does productivity mean for me now?
Yeah.
And like thinking and like going for a walk feels like I'm like dossing off, right? But it's more often than not, it's actually really productive.
And how about feelings day to day?
Yeah.
How are they different versus corporate? Do you feel more anxious, happy, excited? Like, how does that compare?
Like, honestly, every single feeling much more deeply. It's really lonely sitting there working from home. I'm somebody that didn't like to work from home. And so I'm like now choosing to work from home every day. Loneliness it's hard and it's just a fact of where it is right now, but that's an honest truth. And then I would say, like, in terms of when there's a rejection or a client goes cold or whatever it may be, you know, negative things, or like maybe not as many people open the email that you send out or whatever it is, those things I certainly feel much more deeply than I previously would feel similar types of like rejections through work. But then on the flip side, I have to say, it really is true that, like, you know, the highs feel sweeter. And when I had some pivotal moments of certain clients that I signed and certain moments that happened, I just remember sitting there and I was like, wait, this happened? This thing happened? Are you kidding me? And it feels really, really great. And so, yeah, I just say like a much deeper range of emotions.
And looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
The advice I would give to my younger self is try and develop confidence more quickly. Confidence means different things for different people, right? I still have many moments where I feel super nervous and, you know, stressed out and like, oh, what am I going to say or do, or how's that going to go? I think that if you can feel confident, you're just better able to be your best self and your best sort of, I don't know, lean into whatever situation it may be. Whereas in the past, at least for me, when I haven't been feeling confident at all, I wish I just ramped up quicker on the confidence. But that's also, I think, real confidence takes time to build. So I don't know. I don't know what for me personally could have been the shortcuts. I think for different people, it's different.
But if for you specifically, like, what would you say to your younger self if you could convey this message and say, oh, like, what would help your younger self be more confident now looking back?
I think I'd probably say to her, you know much more and you're much smarter than you think you are. Yeah, that's what I would say. Because I was so unsure of my knowledge when I first started.
And what advice would you give to people who are thinking about jumping into entrepreneurship? Yeah, what would be the most important thing that you would like to leave them with? Have
purpose in what you're doing. And what does that mean? That means something that you would do even if you weren't being paid money for it, something that you believe in really quite strongly, that no matter, if you're at 2 a.m. crying in the middle of the night, you're still trying to achieve this thing because it means something. And make sure you have enough money saved up in the bank.
Morgaine, thank you so much for being here with me
Thank
today.
you.